Mayor and Council, this is placed on the agenda for both EDC Board and City Council. And I believe Council certainly has been kept up to date regarding the status of the engineering and the phasing that the EDC Board was considering, and the what was considered kind of the compelling next step would be for the development of the property to make it ready for prospects that frankly are not willing to wait a year and a half for a pad site ready program. EDC Board met last week, and at that time, based on the engineer's estimate of probable costs, as well as a look at funding options, felt like it was in the best interest for the EDC and the City Council to meet together. And so that's the setup for it. And Mandy, I think, is available. You want to go through the costs, et cetera?
Okay. So we, just a brief timeline. I think most of you have been involved in this in some capacity along the way. Back in 2015, 2016 is when the utilities were extended to the business park. Currently, we have a note for the land from back in 2004 that's been refinanced in 2012 and again in 2015. Our balance on that is $312,444.88. The utilities, when they were extended in 2016, we have a balance for that as of today at $976,042.87. So our total that we're looking at is $1,288,847.70. When we refinanced the land note, it actually extended 26 years. So if we were to look at another loan through the bank, then we'd actually have to refinance again. I think what the bank has discussed with us so far, they're wanting to get a proposal to us, but based on our current numbers, I believe we're looking at somewhere around a cap at $900,000 to $950,000. If you look at the probable cost of construction, total at $1.9 million. We have explored grant opportunities. We will continue to explore grant opportunities. I have talked with several other EDCs and cities that have utilized grant funding for business parks. So our hope is that we can find something that would work for our business park as well. Just to kind of reiterate what Finley had said, we're at a place where our business park we have prospects that are interested in moving in, but our timeline to construct, bring in the infrastructure, bring it up to a standard where they're ready to start building there's just too large of a gap from the time that they need to be operating and the time that it takes us to get the infrastructure in the business park.
So as part of the debt amounts that Mandy issued, the EDC has about $510,000 that is restricted for that purpose. So there are some funds available.
This should be in your packet, but this is the phase 1 of the business park that we're proposing developing now. We did complete the engineering in February. So if you notice, it's this road that goes to the county road right here into the entrance on Highway 183. This current proposed road and this road to the back is not part of this phase 1 development. So the probable costs you're seeing are for phase 1 construction. Charlie, did you want to say anything?
We did look at the possibility of selling part of the property to make up funds to see if that would be conducive to make some money to help us along. And during that process, looking back on some of the old appraisals, we determined that most of the value, I don't even remember what the number was, but most of the value is the front part that we want to develop. So, I mean, it was ridiculous. 80% of the value, was in the front part. So we would have to sell so much of the property, we wouldn't have a business park left, pretty much, in order to make anything off of it. So just to let you know that. Yeah, and so we've tried to look at every single option that we could.
And this just kind of validates why we're looking to develop that first portion, because it is the most valuable piece of the entire property. You wanna say something? You've been here long.
What we're here for, Finley says we've got roughly $500,000. We can borrow another $900,000. What we're here to ask the city council to help us get to the finish line and help us find the financing for the remaining $500,000 in order to develop this property. It's been a long time, and it's been a long journey, and we've had people but interested, and we have the land, but we don't have it ready for them to go into. And some of these people are wanting to go in. When they visit a city, they want to see a piece of property that's ready to be moved on to. And this is just the last step to do that. So we're here to ask the city council for any help that you can provide to get to that last piece.
Just a couple of questions real quick to Finley in the discussion with the bank, the refi that we would have to do with the land note, would that be wrapped in and rolled into our 900,000 lending capacity? Because that only gives us 6 rather than 9. So we're actually at a deficit of about 800. I think it's important, and I'm looking at fellow EDC board members, that during the conversation tonight, we maybe make it prevalent to and obvious to council members why you as an EDC board member have your confidence level at the level that it is as to why it's time to invest more into the business park, because not necessarily all of them are aware of conversations that have been had, the potential that exists, and so maybe if you could share with them why you think now is the time, I think that would be beneficial.
So like Steve said, been sitting on this thing a while, and I have personally been a proponent of selling the whole thing. Because if we're not going to do anything with it, there's no sense in us keeping it. And with the possibility of, businesses coming in, like we said, I think there's been several approaches, but we got a goat pasture, and they don't want a goat pasture. They want site ready. If we're going to do something with it, I think now is the time, because we've waited this long, and I think, as most of you know, it only gets more expensive later. And, it's, moving forward, progress. To the south of us, they're gearing up. They're putting in a bunch of houses, and a lot of those people are going to want to get out of there and move up here. So I don't see why we shouldn't hold back. But sorry, I don't see why we shouldn't hold back, other than time and money. And that's my biggest concern, is do we have the time and can we afford it?
And as some of y'all know, we have a current prospect that would be bringing employees opportunity into town that is not in any way, shape, or form in competition with anybody we have in this city. And that has always been our focus, to bring primary jobs without bringing competition to existing businesses. And they are ready to pull the trigger on their side if we're able to help them on our side. And they're a proven business.
With this timeline of us, if we were able to implement this and we're able to find the money to be able to do that, would that fit with this potential business's timeline? Or would it still be too little too late?
From what I understand, if we're able to commit, I think it would fit their timeline.
You know, we can, depending on the location of a business, we can do a temporary drive off of Old Austin Road. So for example, our utilities are in Old Austin Road, water, sewer, electric. So if someone needed to move quicker than the actual construction could take, we could locate them there. And then at the point in time that all the other infrastructure was in place, the permanent infrastructure was in place, they would be able to use that. So there are some lots that we could utilize with a temporary access initially.
Do a construction timeline.
Correct.
First of all, I wanted to ask Finley if you've looked at any ways for this, that the city could look and consider how we could fund this thing. I think, from a council standpoint, that we need to move on with it. I've been here since the purchase of it, working with the city, and it's been years, and it's been talked about in so many different ways. I just don't, I can't see us waiting any longer on this thing. I think we need to move forward, and I think we need to find some directions about how we can fund our part of it and participate in this thing. I also would, you could do a temporary road back in there to get them in there, but it's not going to stand up probably 6 months. So if we're going to do that, we need to move on with the other, and if we're going to do a temporary, it's only during construction, because it won't hold up. But I'd like to see some funding options.
Randy, I think the idea of the temporary road was to give them access to a piece of property that they could start their construction while we're doing ours, so that when we finish, they're finished. Everything's ready to go.
Yeah, I don't disagree with putting in a temporary facility, but I want everybody to understand it's not going to last very long.
Yeah, and in fact, I don't even think the temporary would be engineered. I think it would just be across the pasture, so to speak.
Yeah, less we can spend on it, the better, because it won't hold up.
So do you have any ideas, or is that something you'd have to look into on how we could fund this if we decide to do that?
I think we would look at traditional and maybe even more creative funding options. One would be to take a look, and of course, as we talk about budget, some of the discussion points, even before we start talking about precise numbers for next fiscal year, is going to be, you know, what is the condition of the city financially? What is our audit telling us? What does our fund balance say? Where do we have room, for example, either out of a utility fund or general fund to tap some of that? I think the other thing council would look at is very similar to what we've looked at with other developments where we've gone through that development matrix and say, okay, first of all, is this a project that would be applicable to those types of incentives? And then therefore, yes, it is fundable. It's a question, though, but getting back to Councilman Clark's, where do we find the money? The other thing that Mandy referenced too is that we've had prospects out there, even before my time, that were eligible for CAP funding or another state or federal funding programs, and we feel like one of these prospects could provide the compelling case for us to receive funding either through the state, USDA, or, Texas Department of Ag, or even perhaps EDA.
One other thing is, I think it would be important to put some kind of timeline together so that we're all on the same page of how fast we're moving or how far behind we already are.
Randy, I don't think we have a timeline, but just from experience and looking at what they're proposing to do, barring any unforeseen weather, I'm thinking you're looking at about 8 to 10 months on our part. At the very latest, if you hit if the people that are currently working on utilities in town for the city, they seem to work a whole lot faster than a lot of other people. And you may be looking at 4 to 4 months, 5 months, but then you've got to go in and build the roads after they get through. So I'm thinking best guess is about 8 months.
Okay, so that would put us into our next budget year.
Are we in need of some direction this evening for even to get started on looking into the grant funding? And are we needing to gauge the temperature of council and EDC board together to go ahead and give permission to even begin the process to research the grant funding that's available?
Have to get ours.
Yeah, we're obviously very, very early in this process, and I think our goals tonight were twofold. One was to bring everybody up to date in terms of the projects, and you've gotten tidbits, over the last several months in terms of the engineering and the goals. But the other goal for this agenda item was to see that if you had similar thoughts, if this is a project we need to go ahead and work towards either cooperatively or give the blessing to EDC to move forward to see what other grant funding they can work out. But yes, that's what we're looking for is feedback from both groups to direct us to move forward.
I completely agree with you. I think now's probably the time to go ahead and get it finished out. We've all been talking about this thing for how many decades. I don't love it, just from a return on investment standpoint. It's never going to be anywhere close, but we got to do something with it or sell the whole thing. And I think we're way too committed to sell the whole thing, unfortunately. I think if we get this done, I'm for helping in any way we can raise funding to get this going. But I don't want to see us throw another couple $1 million at it and 30 years later, that's all we have. That's one thing I just really don't want to see. Other than that, I'm all for it.
I agree with Mike. I think some of us sitting here have sat through this thing 20 plus years, and we're still talking about what we're going to do with it. A decision needs to be made. It needs to be one that is financially feasible, and I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we know, at least from the city standpoint, exactly what we might have to offer without that evaluation and seeing where we're at. It's one of those things. We know that from the city standpoint, we've got projects probably that would like to be coming up that we may not be able to afford just because of current financial situations and what has happened. It's across the country. It's across the state of Texas eventually, but you know, who's going to be asking for what? I do think that it's time, if we're going to do anything, that we need to do it now. We lost out on be honest with you, Mayor and I and Finley went down, 3 years ago or whatever, to the Ajimoto main office, and we thought we were all ready to sign a contract and everything else, and the main guy said, no, we're not going to do this. That was an $80 million project, and it cratered the last day of the signing of the contract. He said, no, we're staying in California. We got a free deal. So it's just one of those things that happens. So we've got to be very cautious. I know when you all have prospects come in, the reliability of them working with us and staying with us is another thing that really needs to be vetted and looked at, because somebody might tell you a story and how do you know where it goes?
Well, I'm the same way. We've been on this thing for a long time, and I think we need to do something if we can. We can find the funding, because it's just sitting there, and I think we have a reliable business that can go in there, and once we get somebody in there, I think that'll kind of get the ball rolling maybe.
Well, speaking as both EDC and council, I'm fully in favor of this project. We do need to move forward. We've been looking at it for a long, long time, as all of us on the board know. It's time. It's way past time. Let's get it done.
I think everybody's been aware of where I stand on the project. I think the most important thing to do is the first initial step is to look into the grant funding. I think that will be a big indicator of how warm and fuzzy we get about investing any additional money. And then I think staff just needs to present to us what our options are so that we can wrap our head around the smartest way to go about it. But I think Mr. Clark had a very valuable statement. I'm going to hand the microphone to him and ask him to make it again.
I'm ready to go, as soon as we can figure out how we can move with it. We've been chasing this chicken or the egg for the last 20 years, and we need to go ahead and buy a hen and get it done.
How much, I do have one comment question, I would say. How much commitment do you feel like we have from this potential business? Okay.
We feel confident with the commitment level. Right. Correct.
We're never going to get anybody out there if we don't start having some way to show it and some way to get in there.
Part of some of the grant funding we've looked at is contingent on having a prospect interested. So I think that's favorable for us right now.
Hadn't got anything much to add, but I'm with Randy. We need to shoe this horse or sell it. We've had businesses come in. They've looked at it. Everything is viable. It's perfectly located. They're not ready to build. We're not ready to build. So without a road, without some improvements done, we need to either sell it or shoe it, one or the other. So I think it's ready to go.
I believe from the head nod, Finley is indicating to us that staff has got the direction that they need from both boards. I want to thank the EDC board for coming in for this joint session this evening. Unless council or EDC has anything else they want to add to this conversation, I think we can move on. Do I have a motion to adjourn the joint session between City Council and EDC? So moved. That's a motion from Councilman Monroe and a second from Councilman Clark. All council members in favor, please say aye.
I'll also need a motion to adjourn the joint session for the EDC and the council. All in favor? Aye.
We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break to resituate the room. right, we're now going to reconvene into workshop session. The first item on the workshop agenda this evening is discussion regarding advertising and marketing with the Chamber of Commerce and their events.
Okay, I've tried to do something a little different and type up my notes, but it's gonna go all over the place, so I apologize in advance. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone had an enjoyable Memorial Day weekend. I'm here tonight to discuss the future of chamber-hosted events which take place in our community for the remainder of 2020. I would also like to touch on what we at the Chamber have been doing during this uncertain time for the citizens, visitors, and membership. On March 17th, we had our last in-person board meeting, at which time it was decided to close the doors to the public until further notice. As our business is open to a variety of visitors from across the country, and there was concern during the pandemic. We have kept the phone and email communication going and have updated our media sites as info has become available. We have also been meeting by appointment and providing the entire Lampasas County community resources so they can adjust to their specific needs during the pandemic and beyond. For anyone needing information, we have provided it via email communication and resources out in front of the center. As many may know, the Chamber is itself a nonprofit business in the Lampasas landscape. Most of our funding depends on both Chamber membership and events. However, over the past 3 months, we have experienced a decline in both, putting us in a tight situation. It has required us to look at alternative planning, and therefore we have become more diligent in our budgeting, partnered with the LEDC on some initiatives, been resourceful with our time in handling renovations at the center, and taken the steps to keep everyone informed. We are excited about the future, accommodating our community's needs and and coming back better than ever. Events that were supposed to take place in April and May have been postponed, obviously, along with other chamber events that have been postponed or canceled due to Corona. We have taken the steps necessary to work on plans to move our events to a later date. However, I am here tonight to ask you if in fact they can take place at all, especially events happening in the next few months and into the fall. The new proposed dates for rodeo and barbecue, we were asking if those could take place September 10th through the 12th, 2020 at the 580 Sports Complex. I have already been in front of council to ask for barbecue hot funding and have reserved coming to you to ask for hot funding for rodeo because it has been canceled. It was supposed to take place this weekend and obviously will not. In the interest of time, and so we can again get back to promoting our next event on the schedule, I would like to get clarification on the next event, which is the Toughest 10K race scheduled for July 11th. It is my understanding Spring Hoe is moving forward and has asked us to host this race. We have halted promotion of this event, even though registrations have continued to come in along with sponsorships. I am asking for the blessing of council to confirm we can move forward holding this event on July 11th. If it is approved, I will submit our hot fund request at the next council meeting and proceed with planning. Are there any questions?
Does council have questions regarding the planned event in July? And you're combining the barbecue and the rodeo into one weekend? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
And what sort of feedback are you getting from the Spring Hoe Committee? Are they going forward with everything, all of their events?
It is my understanding that it is a all or nothing deal and they will continue to move forward unless they are told otherwise. But again, that's hearsay. I haven't been in on their board meetings, so I'm not sure, and that's why I know that they came and asked for hot funding, and it was approved. But outside of that, I'm not privy to any other information about Spring Hoe.
You're not going to catch me running a 10K, but I don't have a problem with those who would like to, want to, plan to, and you hosting that event. What about the rest of council?
Absolutely.
I think as long as you can get some contestants.
Yeah, we have 37 registered right now with 3 sponsors. We're ahead of where we were this time last year. understanding that we pulled the trigger on this way in advance, and we were planned and ready for it until Corona changed those plans. But with the blessing of council, we will be able to once again ramp up the promotion and marketing for that beginning tomorrow with a registration deadline of June 24th for the t-shirt, and then July 11th. We had 262 registrations last year. We feel like we can be feasible with 200, and it is my understanding that we'll probably get that.
You have provisions in place to help keep them safe?
Yes, so the timing company and the registration company, a lot of the races that they've been doing lately have obviously gone virtual. However, they are putting things in place to meet the accommodation needs of health advisories and so forth. And those are things that we will be talking about more in depth as we go. I will be coming to council for the first June council meeting with hot funding requests, at which time I will explain some of the provisions that we will be putting in place at that time. We also will be selling face masks, and we will be promoting that it is up to the runner and family designation to wear one, but they will be available.
This is not an action item, council, this evening, so if you have any questions or opposition, now's the time to voice that.
Thank you for squeezing me in. By the way.
Looks like council is fine with you continuing your planning.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Oh, and then as far as the rodeo and barbecue as well, I have also spoken with all the sanctioning committee and the production company, and we have new contracts in place for those dates. It's just a matter of getting approved. So is there a approval on that item as well?
I'm going to double check with Mr. Iker, who's standing in the back. Do you have any issue with those dates and then moving forward?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Well, real quick, Melissa, when do y'all have a plan on opening your doors back up at the chamber?
So we have been leaning towards what the city was planning on doing. Our concern is that we are a very tight space, and we do have visitors and locals in from all over the country. And we don't have the ability to put those like plexiglass screens or anything into place. So what I proposed doing was to do it by appointment or put a note on the door just saying that we are closed to the public. However, I mean, we're right there. So if they were to knock and have a mask, then we would definitely let them in. So the office manager who sits at the front, she's very, very nervous about all of this. So I'm trying to keep her in my thoughts as well, but understanding that we have been significantly busier as the weeks go on. Our phones and email have been very, very busy. So I was proposing possibly a June 1st opening, but I might push it one more week just to put some things into place.
I mean, not to be rude, but we've had a lot of time to put some things into place and plan on our reopening. I'd like to see that resource reopened on June 1st. I think you can do some things with, you know, if somebody shows up, they can wait outside and one person can come in at a time. Or, I mean, I think there's some steps that can be put into place, but I certainly think we need to.
What I will do is I will put together what those steps will be, and I will send those over by the end of the week.
Okay. Thank you.
To open June 1st. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, I might just want to add one item.
Microphone.
So when we've had a request to use facilities, and we perhaps will go into this in a little more detail on another agenda item, but we typically will meet with those groups. We will try to place them in whatever checklist that the governor has, the most appropriate one. And so as folks have requested the use of our facilities, be it the Ruth Eakin or Hostess House, we've said that's fine, but you also have the responsibility as the event organizer to try to follow the governor's guidelines and CDC guidelines.
One more thing, Melissa, if y'all are in need of maybe some masks to have there at the door available to hand out, please get with Finley. We probably could have helped with that as well. I think we've got quite a few. Okay. Next item on the workshop agenda is discussion regarding commercial parking in residential areas.
Mayor, Council, what Becky's passing out to you is a working draft that I have for the commercial vehicle parking in the city of Lampasas. The draft has in it definitions in accordance with 78-214. It also talks about no parking areas, and the weight of a vehicle is described for the commercial vehicle. Also, it talks about other areas of the city where commercial vehicles cannot be left unattended and where they cannot park, such as on drainage areas. Cannot park in residential areas, cannot park in the alley, cannot leave an unattended vehicle with hazardous or dangerous materials on it parked in the city. Also, we talked about commercial tractor trailers, semi-trailers with animals and odors, not leaving those parked on residential streets overnight. We talked about not parking commercial vehicles that are not used on our residential streets either. Can't park an unattached trailer on our residential streets. And then it talks about that the ordinance shall not prevent for our electric crews, utility service, water, wastewater, garbage, if their vehicles fall in that weight limit, to be prevented from parking. We go through and talk about a residential permit for parking. I put in this at 20 because we have approximately 20 commercial vehicles at this time that park, and we don't want to create where more people can move in to park commercial vehicles. Also, that they have to live here 90 days prior to requesting that permit. And then what documents they'll need for their application to show that they're a resident. And then the commercial vehicle parking permits talk about that the width of the road has to be, if it's a 2-lane street, has to be a minimum of 28 feet for two-way traffic and parking on the street. We have to have enough room for fire apparatuses, ambulances to go down that street if we have a large vehicle parked there. And then also the requirements for single-lane parking, and that we won't allow wide width vehicles to be parked on our streets. Several other restrictions, and then we talk about property line, how close to a property line that they can park. We put 100 feet from the residence or property line. When they can travel in our residential areas, they're not going to be restricted from making deliveries when they have to make deliveries. And then in this, we also talk about our park area, that they can't park in our city parks or unimproved property unless they own that property and it's a business and they're parked adjacent to their business. Authorized towing if we need to tow it. And so once a person applies, then we would have a survey requirement that would have to happen. The chief of police would conduct that survey, have that survey. The code enforcement officer would be part of that survey. If they didn't agree with the survey and our findings, then they could petition the chief of police. And then there's a public hearing through the council with an administrative fee of $220. Permit fee for a year, we estimated that it would cost us about $120 to do the surveys and check the area, the roadway, make sure that there's not any hazards, that the roadway won't be damaged, that the roadway is strong enough to support a vehicle. And then another annual fee for just the tractor and not the trailer, which is about half price, $60. And then we have some that may come to town 1 or 2 days a year. So we did a one-day visitor hang tag permit, don't know where I got hashtag from, hang tag permit, and then a replacement cost for lost permits. We made display for permits. If it's not displayed, that it could be a violation. Revocation of permits, what would happen if they received parking violation, if they didn't follow the rules from the ordinance. And then effective issuance of the permit. It doesn't give them any special right to park in any special place, doesn't give them parking, it's just a parking area or additional parking time. It's just that they can park their vehicle. Also with their application, they have to tell us, explain from the truck route, our established truck route, how they will travel from that truck route to their residence so that we can check with those residences to see if there's a problem. We discuss in the ordinance about leaving their accessory generators running, their vehicles running. Those are complaints that we receive quite often in residential areas. They go out early, start their vehicles, and leave them running for 30, 40 minutes. We'll get complaints. So we have that also addressed in this ordinance. And then there are exceptions and defenses to this that we've added to this. Disabled vehicles, there's an emergency situation where roadways are closed beyond us or even here. Wrecker drivers, if they have one of the large wreckers and they're on call, electric, water, sewer, garbage, if they're on call, they can park at their residences. Emergency vehicles. Then I had some questions that I highlighted at the end of it for you. They'll have to follow zoning regulations in that area. And then with that was a question of, if they have a large paved driveway, could they park the tractor or tractor trailer in their driveway if it wasn't a visibility problem? Also, we have one area in town where it's gated and they park their tractor trailer in their gated area. Could they do that where it couldn't be seen from the residential areas? Because you have to get in, you have to look at it and think about, if you can't sell a piece of property because there's an 18-wheeler out on the roadway blocking the view, you have to look at that also. Would that be something that you would want us to look at? And then would the city allow parking in other areas of the city? And then that plan in here that in 5 years that this gets reviewed again to see if it's still needed. And I went through that very quick. You'll see also I provided you with a class of vehicles. When I'm talking about commercial vehicles, I'm talking about class 7, which is the 26,001 pound over that.
I think for efficiency purposes, if you would just start with each item that you need clarification from council on and bring that up, and we'll just kind of move through the list.
Sure, okay. First thing was the application. The application part is we'll have to make sure that the roadway is sufficient, it's in sufficient width, and that it won't be damaged, that we won't cause any damage to the roadway if they're allowed to park there. The second with that is doing the survey. Are y'all okay with that? Does that sound feasible to you?
Does council approve the application process and the survey process?
I'm going to be honest. I would really like, since we were just given this, is there any way that we could maybe look at this next week? Like, give us time to go through this?
Well, let's get our questions answered. This isn't an action item. We're in a workshop on it, so this is where we can ask some questions and get some of the answers, and then we can table the action item later on if you're not prepared to take an action on this item. Okay. But let's go ahead and workshop and get through the questions with the chief so she can finish the ordinance.
Okay.
I'm good with the application and survey. That would be a good start to continue.
And then in the application process, we put that you had to live in the city of Lampasas at your residence for 90 days prior to applying for that. And then we also put that July 1st, 2020 is the cutoff date to apply. If you lived in Lampasas after that time, then you wouldn't qualify for it. It'll be 5 years before somebody that lives in Lampasas after that time to be able to ask for a permit.
I don't necessarily know that I approve of that portion, because if somebody gets a new job and
Okay.
that need doesn't exist now, but it could arise over the next 5 years for them. So I don't know that we need to have a deadline. I think I think if they live here as of now and that's their current job, they have a deadline to get applied, go through the process, but I don't think we need to limit them for a 5-year period.
Okay.
I didn't understand the need for the 90-day residency either.
Okay. We didn't want people moving in and out of here, they would live here for a short period, park their vehicle. We go through this process and then have to do it again. We wanted to look at residents that had been here for a while, that had established residency in Lampasas. Okay? The permit fees, $120 per year. Like I say, we did a cost for services with that. That's about what it's going to cost us to do a survey. If they were to petition, it's going to cost us about that much money for that. And then if they want to just park a trailer versus, a tractor versus trailer, we did the half price with that.
I'm comfortable with that number.
Council have questions or comments on that one? Okay.
Okay. And then we did the half price for the one-day hang tag, and that would be for 24 hours if they were to park. We have a couple that come in a couple of times a year, 2 or 3 times a year, and we would have to check to make sure that everything's okay and do it pretty quick for them to be able to park in their area with permit.
So with the permitting for the 1 or 2 day thing, like the hang tag permits, would they go to the police station for this, for all of these permits?
Yes, they would come to the police station for the permits, yes.
If it was weekends or anything like that?
Yes, yes. Yes, 24/7. And then display of permits, we would provide them with a permit. They would have to hang it on their mirror or put it over in the window so we could see that. If it wasn't displayed, then that would be an offense in itself for fail to display, because now we have to check and make sure that they have their permits and all. Revocation of a permit, like I say, that's a separate offense, and that's if they have violations, parking violations, or we have issues with them, they're not following this ordinance. And then if the zoning ordinance is all right with it, do you agree that they could park on their paid parking if it's large enough for them to park, or no?
I'm not particularly a fan of 18-wheelers parking in driveways beside houses, but, if you live in a residential area, do you want to look at an 18-wheeler parked beside your house? What's the difference of it being on the street and being on the house? If part of what we were discussing at the last workshop was consideration of your neighbors, are we defeating that by just letting them move it up in the yard?
I think that's the same problem I have. If they're pulling up in the parking area beside the house and all that stuff, I don't mind them behind the privacy fence, but out in the open, I'm just not in favor of.
But doesn't that go back to telling somebody what they can and can't do on their own property?
We have restrictions and ordinances regarding nuisances and things like that.
Yes.
Is it
Yes,
in
we
your
do.
survey? You still have within your survey to visit with the neighbors on each of these?
Would you want them to be permitted if they're parking in their driveway? Not on a public street? I would leave that up to the council to tell me. If you want it permitted, then we would have to do the survey with it. And I would suggest that we do, because it could be a problem to the residences in that area.
That is kind of what I'm saying, is we need to be able to control that in case it is an issue.
Now, the next question, I haven't been answer that. I ask if they have gated property or You know, if they're behind, say, a 6-foot fence, or they have landscaping that would hide that vehicle in their backyard or side yard, would that be an
I think
option too?
that's a lot better than in the driveway. I don't think tractor trailers of any kind belong in residential areas. I just don't.
Yeah.
That's just my thought of it. I don't think that we need 38,000-pound vehicles on our roadways and driveways. I mean, no disrespect to anybody that has to drive their truck home every day, but I just, as a resident, I don't think that they belong there. I don't think it's as big of an issue if it's behind someone's house in a completely closed or gated deal. I mean, again, you can have a junk car back there, you can have whatever you want back there, but you can't have it in the front yard in your driveway.
Yeah.
So that's just the way that I see it.
Yes. We have an area in town where there is an 18-wheeler. The whole 18-wheeler fits in their backyard, and you don't see it just driving around the area. And I wanted to make sure with you that
If
you're
that
okay
doesn't
with it.
disturb the, like the starting at 3 o'clock in the morning with the other neighbors and,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, I think we need to still have a permit process for those because we need to be able to make sure that the in and out from their property is not posing a danger to those around them. You know, that the roadway is safe for moving in and out of the property as well.
Correct. And then you don't want do you want a review in 5 years of this ordinance?
Yes.
But you
Sure.
don't want to limit someone.
Yeah, I don't think we need to put a deadline on applying. I mean, because someone's situation could change, their career could change today, so.
Okay. Any questions? Any other questions?
How much burden is this going to put on your staff?
I'm sorry?
I said, is this going to put a pretty good burden on your staff, checking all that stuff as well?
If we limit the amount of permits, it won't be a huge burden. It will be an added burden, but it won't be a huge burden if we limit them.
I don't want all this to take away from so many other duties that you have.
Right. If we limit, we have about 20 currently that are parking in the city. And when I say they're parking, they're here within the guidelines of parking on our residential roadways. And, we would put a lot of the burden on the person that wants a permit. I will say that with the application, providing names, addresses, phone numbers for us to do our survey. But it will provide some proofs, have some burden on us.
And if you permit them, then you're going to make sure that the emergency vehicles can still get through there before you issue the permit.
Absolutely, yes. They have to have the width for that, and we have to make sure that they can get through. That is the number one requirement is life safety. We have to be able to provide life safety and utilities to the residences in that area.
Chief, I saw a RV this week that had all the slide outs on it parked in the road.
Not allowed. We have a city ordinance against that.
What if it's still hooked up to a truck with all the slide outs?
Shouldn't, they've got time to, 72 hours to load, unload, clean it up. So if they have it out doing that, that's a little bit different. But if it's just parked there over that time period, then
It's
they're
been
in
there for about
violation.
4 days or whatever, which I don't necessarily have a problem with that moving stuff in and out. But why are all the slide outs out?
Now, we would have to check with them and see what's
I mean,
what's
that's,
going on.
I haven't.
it's right in front of Burger King.
Yes.
I have an RV, but the slide out that has 3 slide outs, but the slide out on the side of the pavement
Yes.
is not open.
Okay.
They
So
can
when you
get through
open your
there with
slide
one
out, do you
slide out.
open it for cleaning?
I open it for cleaning, but I do that before I pull it into town.
Yeah. In the recreational vehicle ordinance, they're allowed to clean, we give them 72 hours. 4 days is too long. They would be in violation
Is there not a
regardless.
maximum width that they're allowed to take up in the street?
We did not put a maximum width on that ordinance. We just talk about travel, recreational vehicles, travel trailers in that ordinance. We could go back and readdress that if you wanted that readdressed.
I don't think you got to. I mean, it can definitely be an issue, but I think it needs to be up to
Yes.
your discretion. All of our streets are different sizes.
Absolutely, yes,
So
yes,
one might not be as bad as the other.
right. Right. And that's, with this ordinance, gives some discretion with that also. When we talk about roadways, there's one 18-wheeler that parks on a roadway, and it's their family on both sides of the roadway. So they could do a waiver, you know, saying that they could park within 100 feet, that they don't mind that their view is blocked. When I talked to Mr. Farr, he has a duplex where he can't rent one of the duplexes because the 18-wheeler blocks parking and blocks the view. That in that particular area, the roadway is too narrow for an 18-wheeler to park on it anyways.
Even a vehicle.
I'm sorry?
So in a situation like that, they wouldn't be able to be permitted. Because
We would not be able to permit if they don't have the width that we need for life safety, public services, public utilities. We would not be able to permit it. And we put those requirements in this ordinance.
Chief, is there anyone interested in town with a vacant lot that would rent out space to these vehicles to park?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. Now, there are some commercial businesses in town and in the county that allow people, 18-wheelers to park, commercial vehicles to park at them. Also, you know, I mentioned TxDOT doing their assessment. So there may be some areas in the future that would allow some parking through TxDOT's assessment.
I know, I always call it specialty brands, but however you say, Animoto, they park a lot of trucks on the county's property there. So
Yes.
that's theirs? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yes. I'm sure there's someone that, you know, would see an opportunity to make some money and do a commercial parking.
While we have Chief here and we're workshopping the ordinance, does council have any additional questions? All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the workshop agenda, discussion regarding intersection of East 3rd Street and Live Oak Street.
Mayor, Council, Councilman Toops reached out to me asking that we would look at that intersection for additional stop signs. Councilman Toops, would you like to say anything about that?
Yes, I was down there in the, when they were, goodness, I've lost the word. When they were, you know, putting in our LTX, and there were people, I mean, like, just in the matter of time that I was standing outside, I mean, like, flying down that road on 3rd Street. And, you know, as we're beginning to grow and get hopefully more people downtown, you know, it's just, I think it's a safety issue. Not necessarily a 4-way. I was kind of thinking maybe like a 3-way, because I don't know how you would do it on that bank, like the bank side where people could see that. But like right outside of our Mercantiles, which is the 3rd and Live Oak, I feel like there needs to be something there because of that, you know, walkway that people are starting to utilize a lot more.
So,
Councilman Monroe, have you noticed? Because
I don't notice a lot of traffic there anyway, but the traffic that is really troublesome is the 18-wheelers, and Chief Bailey and I have talked about it several times with Lieutenant Montgomery. Most of the merchants are upset about the 18-wheelers. I feel that an additional stop sign of any sort would impede traffic that much more because they're stopped. It takes so long to stop them and get them going again. Right there in front of the bank where an 18-wheeler would stop, you really can't go past. There's not two-way traffic at that point if there were an 18-wheeler stopped there. So I think it would cause more problems than do good. I agree with the walkway that that it would be nice to be able to walk across the street without worrying about it. But out on 4th Street, that walkway isn't protected at all either. Those cars are going much faster than on 3rd Street. So maybe looking at both areas would be beneficial, but I'm not sure another stop sign would cause any.
I think probably the best route to go would be just an overall traffic study of our downtown.
Yes.
As traffic, we've getting lots of complaints about not just the speed at which vehicles are coming through, but the size of the vehicles coming through, the confusion, you know, every town's courthouse square, you drive around it in a different manner, but I think perhaps we need to look at overall ways to improve traffic on the downtown area.
Absolutely, that's what I was going to suggest, is if we could do that. And we discussed it today at the police department.
Mayor, I just want to say, as far as any street in town, I'm not aware of any kind of traffic patterns or any kind of study that's been done in regards to where we put a stop, where we put a yield, or anything like that. We have not completed our thoroughfare plan with our comprehensive plan. We don't have any kind of rules or guidance in regards to whether a yield or a stop has been placed. And I think that's something we're going to have to look at citywide.
Let's start with downtown and see how that goes.
There are municipal codes for that. I've talked to TxDOT. I spoke with Eric with TxDOT. He's doing some research for me also, and he's going to call me back. Called him to talk to him about the 3-way stop or 4-way stop, talk about crosswalks and some other issues, some other things that we've seen down in that area.
And we have some means by which we can encourage redirection of the commercial traffic that goes to the facilities that are located downtown, not only in communication with those facilities and giving instructions to their vendors, but also we can reach out to Google and Apple Maps and provide some information for them on where commercial traffic is and is not allowed to travel. So
We've also talked to TxDOT regarding permits for 18-wheelers that they receive before they go on their trip to help us out with that as well.
anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 7, discussion regarding operations of city pools for the 2020 season. Let me, before Mr. Eicher starts to speak, we've got a phone number. Does somebody know where the phone number is? Right here. For those of you who wish to call in during the workshop session with any comments or questions, the phone number to reach us is 512-556-0332.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As a follow-up to the brief discussion we had about our pools at the last council meeting, our pool manager, Kim Watkins, and staff have put together what they believe is a plan for a safe and successful pool season for Hancock Pool. And Kim is here to present that plan to you. If you have any questions of me, I'll be right here.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me here. Most of you know me. I'm Kim Watkins. Some of you don't. I run the pools. I've been doing it for a long time, and it's just what I love to do. I'm a little shorter. There we go. At the May 11th meeting, I feel like things were not explained, and so I think the public was a little upset about maybe some of the stuff that the information they didn't get instead of the information they did get. So every year there's a process for me to hire and train and certify all new employees. This whole process takes about a month. And right now we're at May 26th. We should have opened last weekend. So in this process, we hire 32 employees to run both pools. 23 of those are lifeguards. And that includes myself and my assistant manager, Nora. I have 8 trained guards that have reapplied this year. This is one of those transitional years where some of our kids are off to college, they're in their 3rd year, they're not coming back, they're in internships and things like that. So we would have to train 12 new lifeguards. As Chris expressed in the last meeting, we haven't received enough applications. We reran the application process, and I have not seen those, but I believe, talking to Chris, that we still don't have enough applications to supply both pools with adequate lifeguards and have a safe environment for our kids and the adults. When I train, the process of the whole hiring and training, that whole process takes approximately a month. So that would put me not opening both pools until the end of June. And I think at this point, a 5-week pool season is what we're looking at because school is scheduled to start on August 10th. I usually close down Hannah Springs Pool a week prior to school starting because those teenagers and college kids, they need a week to prepare. So I'd hate to keep both pools shut down all season. So I think at this time, I'd like to propose that we shut Hannah Springs Pool because it takes the majority of our lifeguards and staff to run that pool. If we did even try and open it, we'd have to eliminate after-hours pool parties, swim lessons for sure. There's no way we could accomplish that this summer. And that's if we had enough employees, which I don't believe we have. I have at this time selected 10 employees that are return guards, fully trained. There are 2 guards that need to be recertified, which would only take me a couple hours. So if I keep with those 10 people that are fully trained, very experienced, very responsible, I think we have a safe plan to safely open Hancock Pool. Some things about Hancock Pool is it's a grassy area. We have several picnic tables that we have spaced out. We've spent a lot of time on Hancock making improvements. 1, to keep us busy until we made this decision, and 2, because Hancock needed this stuff done. We've painted all the lattice work on the Hancock side of the hostess house. We've power washed every single cement sidewalk over there. There's not a lot of people in the water at one time at Hancock because it is so cold, and they don't stay long. The average family at Hancock Pool stays about 2 hours. Hancock Pool is low maintenance. We don't have to pay for chemicals. We just have our amazing Darby Macera, who is the hardest worker in the world and does her job over there, and I don't have to worry about it. So my assistant manager and I, Nora Lawson, we've spent a lot of time talking about what we could do to get it open. We've brainstormed. I have personally taken extra courses online through the American Red Cross, one of them being the psychological first aid of the COVID-19. I have a certificate. If y'all would like me to produce that, I can. It just basically talks about what we're doing in our aquatic environment to help spread COVID, what we can do. I've also spent many hours.
Not to help spread it.
Help not spread it, sorry. I've spent many hours on Zoom meetings, which I would be very happy if I never had to do another one of those, with other aquatics directors in our surrounding areas that are in my network that of what they're doing, what we're doing, kind of just sharing our ideas on how we can make it work. So my proposal to you tonight is to close Hannah for the season. There are necessary repairs that need to be done over there that I'm hoping can be done, and we can take advantage of that. I'm proposing also that we open Hancock May 30th with these provisions. I would like to start with 33% capacity, which would be 65 people. Lampasas County residents only. No one under 18 without a parent. I have separated all the picnic tables in a proper manner. I will have staff that will clean the bathrooms after every use. We have already had a training session on how we're going to do this. Guard stands will be sanitized every hour on our breaks. I'll personally check the identification to comply with the Lampasas County residents only. Nora and I have set up a system with the Lampasas County map and an app to actually look up that address in case we're confused, like on the Kempner Coppers Cove area. If we could open it, I would like to get it open Wednesday through Sunday rather than Thursday through Sunday. Proposing change the hours a little bit on Sunday to give Darby a little extra time in the evening to get started on cleaning, because we do empty and clean that every week. We also have some lap swimmers that we usually do lap swim for. I'm proposing that we only do 6 people, 30-minute period for the hour before we open the pool. I know that some of you might have a problem with some of my provisions. For instance, I know in the last meeting it was mentioned by Mr. White that we shouldn't take anything more from our kids. The only reason I'm asking for the no one under 18 without a parent is because right now our rules are set, and they were like this when I came in, that a 9-year-old can come to the pool by themselves. I don't personally agree with it. I just enforce the rules. I don't feel like with the social distancing that we need to try and accomplish, that I can reason with a 9-year-old wrestling with another 9-year-old in the grass. There's a lot of parents, I understand, that have to go back to work and things like that. But I think we have to take a certain amount of responsibility when they walk in the gate. So that's what I'm proposing.
Open this up for council discussion, and I'm sure we all have comments, so I can go ahead, Ms. Keeney.
I was just going to ask, because I understand you're wanting to start with 33%, which I totally understand. But would you, after y'all kind of get a feel for it, would you then slowly increase it to where it goes with the governor's guidelines, or?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I had a quick question about the Lampasas County residents only. I mean, I'm good with that, but then in the case of this being summertime, people traveling, coming to visit family, that's a place that like a family would like to go. My cousins came in from, Louisiana or wherever. And so, like, how are we gonna, they're with.
Unfortunately, it's a different summer, and we just have to try and do what we can for our residents, just like every other town is trying to do. And I'm not sticking to these. This is just my suggestion.
These are just her recommendations to council, then
Yes.
we'll determine.
Yes.
The no one without a parent just kind of defeats the whole purpose for me.
Well,
Completely defeats the purpose.
Of the
think-
33%.
And I knew that y'all might have a problem with that, and I understand that. But can we set another provision where we're not having, maybe you have to be 13?
Well, you're the director, Kim. You don't argue with nobody.
Well,
So
I
if there's a problem with some sort of social distancing, then you do whatever you need to do. But I don't think that limiting them to making sure that their parent there is doing anything to stop the spread.
Right. And I agree. I just tried to write these recommendations what I thought the public would want. I watch these kids all summer. I know every single one of them. So whatever y'all decide, I will abide by. And I don't put up with no stuff from kids.
I know you don't.
I will release them from
Do we have a system by which we could perhaps, upon the initial visit for the first time of the summer, someone between the ages of 13 and 18, a parent comes and signs an acknowledgement that there are provisions in place that we've put in that are different from the usual usage regarding the COVID situation, and do their children not abide by those guidelines in addition to the other rules, they will not be allowed back for the summer?
Yes.
And let that enforcement start with, at home with a good parenting?
Yes, absolutely.
And you could just keep a file box with that?
I'd be more than happy to write something up and make the parent sign it, absolutely.
I mean, I'm comfortable with 13 to 18-year-olds without a parent,
Yes,
having the
just-
parent at least
Oh,
acknowledge, sign something.
My kids were there at 12 years old all the time.
Yeah, but at 9?
What age is the council comfortable with?
12, 13 to 18 would be good.
You're 13?
13.
Is that
With the
something you
parent-
could
with the
work up
parent-
and then maybe run by Finley and make sure?
And
Okay.
I like the parent acknowledgement. I think that that's something that just kind of gives it a little more meat.
Well, and that's kind of how I feel about it. It's kind of the parents' responsibility to make sure their children are social distancing, not mine.
And let's be sure we post our expectations and rules.
We have everything set up to open the 30th. I would need till the 30th to hire 3 more employees that are not on payroll yet. Do the shopping for the concession stand, which we will do local here at Walmart rather than the big shopping that we need for both pools. And maybe move some stuff around, but we have most things in place. The lifeguards had written out new signs, new rules, we have the menu set. They've already researched what, we've taken care of everything, other than the last minute stuff that we need for approval.
And I'm with Ms. Keeney. In the event that things move along and we're able to increase the capacity, I would like us to monitor that.
And I don't mind upping the capacity now to 50% if y'all would approve that. When I originally discussed this, we were still at 25%. And so I was gonna ask for a little more. But I wouldn't mind doing a 50% at 100 people.
I'm good with 50%. I'm good with 50%.
I mean, I mean,
If you
What
look
you
at the
think?
management,
We can definitely manage it. For sure.
council's comfortable with 50%?
yeah. Will you still be able to have private parties at Hannah after hours, or is that
Hancock.
what?
Hancock.
I know we're talking about Hancock. I'm aware.
Oh, have private parties at Hannah?
Yes, the after hours with that same staff.
So, with the cost of chemicals and the amount of employees that we're gonna have, it's just not reasonable. We would have already canceled private parties anyway, not have any, even if we had a minimal season at Hannah.
Why?
Because of the staffing, we would have had a shorter staff. Unfortunately, I don't think that private parties are a good idea this year. I don't think that I think the public's all accepted the fact that, I've answered thousands of emails in the last 2 weeks. People trying to schedule parties.
There's several pools across the state that aren't opening at all this season, and I think that we should be proud of the fact that Ms. Watkins and our Parks Department have gone to the efforts to create an environment in which we can have some type of pool season here in Lampasas.
Yeah. And then while I'm here, I'd like to ask you, for my back-to-school event, I usually have the big back-to-school event at Hannah Springs. It brings in about 425 people. I'd like to try and do it this year at Hancock, if I could, if the governor and everything is released. So I'd like y'all to just keep in mind that I'd still like to try and do that. And it's usually the Saturday, the first Saturday of August, I believe, but I don't know how that falls this year, so.
You may have to just do some staggered scheduling based on last name. If your last name is from this, this letter to this letter, you come between certain hours. That way you can kind of maybe attempt to control the volume of people there at one time.
Okay. Huh?
First Saturday is August 1st.
August 1st, yeah, that would be perfect, right before school.
Council, have any more questions or comments for Ms. Watkins? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving along, item number 8, discussion regarding the 2020-2021 budget.
Mayor and council, this is primarily an agenda item, just to let you know that we're getting started and to throw out a few upcoming dates that serve as targets as we prepare the budget. We've got a rather lengthy agenda tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and move through this fairly quickly. So we start generally by putting together some assumptions in terms of how we prepare the budget, and these are very close to the same assumptions that we try to prepare council for every year. In terms of staffing, it's our goal to be a net neutral. We may change some positions, we may combine some positions, we may eliminate positions for others, but our goal is a net neutral. And I'd like to say that, you know, that's what we'll bring to you, although we may also bring with you options if we feel like there is a need in terms of staffing, which you have looked at over the years, whether it be in the development area or cemetery or PD, et cetera. Our tax rate, council should be proud of the fact that you have one of the lowest tax rates in Central Texas, and it's our assumption that you want to maintain that tax rate. You certainly know what even a 2 or 3 penny mill levy increase does. It does not do hardly anything to your budget in terms of your revenue production. We are concerned about sales tax going into FY21. We think that, you know, hopefully we'll get a robust bounce back once things open up, but we're I think, going to be very conservative in terms of sales tax. And then conversely, on property tax, modest increase. We are seeing the proposed evaluation or the preliminary evaluation gone up slightly. I forgot the percent on that, but we're expecting probably a modest increase in property tax. Health insurance is just a reminder to council. So when we signed our contract last year with Scott and White, that included a provision going into this year that the cap would not be increased by more than 5.5%. And we're certainly hopeful that it'll be less than that based on the health of our workforce and the responsibility our employees have been taking. Fees and rates, no increases at this point, and obviously we don't want to bring you a budget that has a $200,000 or $300,000 deficit. We want to bring you something that's balanced or very close to balanced. Some of the issues and impacts that we'd point out to you now, and some of them somewhat came to light as we talked about the business park, but in terms of utilities, I think I've referenced the trends in terms of electric loads throughout the state. Electric loads are down, 3 to 5% overall. We think with the economy opening back up, that trend will reverse. It also is directly related to our weather. The hotter it is, the more electrons we sell. We also have seen some positive impacts from new developments in terms of utilities, although make no mistake, every renovation, every new home is going to use a lot less electricity than, for example, mine home does. So as things are developed and built out, obviously our efficiency in terms of energy use goes up. We also know that there are at least some short-term volatility in the wholesale markets with a lot of unknowns with the trends. Sometimes lower load will drive your wholesale rates up because they don't have as many electrons to spread those administrative costs over, so that's something that may impact our budget and our budget planning. We also have some things going on that are funded, but we want to be very clear to council that these items may result in very compelling projects. For example, our pre-treatment study that is currently going on that you'll hear more about, the upper pressure plane study, the comprehensive plan. There may be spin-off projects to those studies, as there should be. Council's made the investment in determining what the needs of those particular pieces of infrastructure are, and don't be surprised if we come back and say, hey, we may have to spend some money to address the issues that were brought forward in this study. Issues in CIP, so we certainly haven't finalized the CIP report, but there are public safety items that I think the committee will make council aware of. We'll need some funds for new apparatus for communications that we've actually talked about the last couple of years. East 3rd Street improvements, at least right now, that is scheduled for FY21. The 3rd Street improvements, I believe the engineer's estimate on probable costs is going to be more than what we normally budget for streets. So we may may look at completing that project, but would have to be creative in terms of how the funding pieces come together. Facility improvements, not great, but slight facility improvements in the IT building, PD, and perhaps some other areas. Fleet, and then the hostess house, although I think what the CIP committee will ultimately recommend to council is that the hostess house utilize HOT funding. We have some other issues that we'll talk about during this process. The Fund 68 balance that we've carried forward, that's the 2016 CO issuance. Use of fund balance, whether we start looking more particularly at those large pieces of equipment and going to a lease rather than a purchase of those. And then we'll also want to deal with employee compensation. Just some very quick dates to throw at you, and even though there's only a list of 10 items here, council should understand that there may be 2 or 3 steps in between each one of these items, depending on specifics of a workshop that you may want to dig in deeper to an issue on. Audit committee, we'd like to get that done sometime in the next couple of weeks. We think that sets us up for a good understanding of the financial position of the city, the fund balance, available funds that we could utilize perhaps. Staff will be turning in their projected year-end and initial budget June 5, and we'll take about 2 weeks to review those budgets with those individual departments internally. We want to try to complete the CIP report by June 19, and then we'll come back at our regular meeting on the 22nd and do updates and hopefully initial projections. Every year, it seems like we shoot for the last meeting in June, and then it turns into the first meeting in July before we really roll out initial projections. I think our staff is committed to working hard on the front end so that we can bring you something by the end of June. Certainly, if we had to put it off, it wouldn't be the first time we put it off till July 13. The other thing that we'd ask from you, either at June 22nd or July 13, is what are the areas that are of interest to you? What are the priorities? What items do we want to workshop specifically? We've done this over the years where we've looked at cost of service, we've looked at utility rates, we've looked at staffing and salary comparisons. So we certainly are interested in council's input so we can set those workshops up. We will have to set a proposed tax rate around the first week of August. We'll also be looking at LCAD providing us with the effective and rollback rates by the end of July. Ultimately, this process, which we've got 4 months until the second reading of a budget ordinance, which really means we've got about 3 months, but we're already a half a month into the first 3 months. So we've got about 2.5 months to do this work so that we can have our first reading September 14 and our second reading of our budget September 28. As I said, this was simply to provide you an update and let you know that we are working in this direction. We do look forward to your priorities and your input, and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Finley. Item number 9, discussion regarding opening city facilities and local updates to pandemic.
Mayor, is it on? Can you hear me? Yep. Mayor and council, as far as the opening of city businesses and a pandemic update, I'll let Chief talk about that at the end. Right now, all city buildings will open to the public June the 1st with some restrictions. And that would be the occupancy of each place is kind of determined what they suggested. All departments, staff will return to full-time on June the 1st while practicing social distance. We are still going to try to keep the crews split the best we can and try to keep them apart. Still work the same crews that have been working every other day, just like they were when they get here full-time. Only put them together when we have to. They all have masks. They all have gloves. We still want to practice social distancing. Sneeze guards have been installed at City Hall, library,
golf course, and animal shelter. And along with that, some of them have the 6-foot stickers on the floor to stay 6 foot apart from the counter. They have to stand on those marks. And as far as every office will have poster boards at the locations with information on it, what our occupancy is, what we expect you to do inside, what you can do, what you can't do. City Hall will have a maximum of 5 people that are allowed in. Library has set their number at 15. And animal shelter has set theirs at 2. Just because they can control them better instead of a whole family getting in there. I mean, it'll be a case-by-case basis, but social distance, like I said, will be stressed. And we have told employees to stay home if you don't feel well and contact a supervisor immediately if you're running a fever so they can know, what's going on. We can tell everybody in that crew. We can tell everybody to be careful and let's see what's going on. Communication, communication, communication. That's what we got to do to keep us safe. And as far as me speaking, I'm speaking on behalf of hopefully all the employees. We want to thank the mayor, council, and Mr. Finley for looking out for the safety of our employees during this pandemic. I mean, it's really appreciated what y'all have done for us, allowed us to separate, allowed us to take care of ourselves, our families. People with kids have had a hard time having sitters. And it's just, we just can't thank you enough for what y'all have done for us. I mean, you have looked out for the employees and the city. Thank you very much for that. And I wanted to see if y'all had any questions for the chief on an update on the pandemic. Any questions? All right.
Do you want to talk?
You want to talk?
Okay. Thank you, Ricky. Thanks for nothing, Chief.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We've got a long workshop agenda, folks, and I'm sorry. The Finley's fault. Item number 10, discussion and updates regarding city projects. Let me just ask council, is council wanting to continue to move on? This is going to be a long update on this agenda item. Do you want this evening?
We can wait.
I said council, not staff.
I wouldn't be opposed to putting it off to the next meeting.
The Eagle Scouts here.
Why do we
I
have
understand,
10 workshop?
But is he part of item number 10?
Well, why did we do him first?
Let's go ahead and have the ones that are present this evening give their update. The rest of them will roll over to the next workshop agenda. Apologies, I assumed that he was under non-agenda items.
Sorry, we put it all together. JT Saucedo is here to discuss his Eagle Scout project. This project was actually approved by council in October of 2019. I do have some pictures that I laid out in your dais for you to review, and he will tell you the progress so far.
Hello, all right. Hi, I'm JT Salcedo, and so far we've started construction on our project, on my Eagle Scout project, thanks to Mike Hill Construction.
Can you talk into the microphone? Sorry.
Whoa, okay, that's a lot better. So far we've laid down the concrete form so that we can be able to pour the first batch of concrete, hopefully by this week. Right now, we're focusing on colors and other stuff. We can't actually pour the concrete yet because we have to make sure the weather allows us to be able to. If it's too hot, the concrete might dry up too fast, and so we have to make sure that the weather's right. And if it rains, we can't do that either. We should be able to, by next week, to have plants figured out and irrigation system for the actual butterfly project, so the flowers and all of that will actually stay alive. And other than that, we really haven't done much besides lay out the form. If y'all have the aerial photos, you can see what we've done so far.
Is everything going to your liking?
Yes, it's going really well so far.
Is it a lot of work?
Oh, definitely. The most difficult part so far has to be just deciding the colors and the patterns you want on the concrete.
Yeah, style is a picky thing. We appreciate your efforts. Council, have any questions for? No? Thanks for updating us.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Looks like Jason Jones is up next.
Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to stick around. I've got a two-page handout here. Do you have a copy of this in front of you? If not, I can, maybe Becky can pass it out. Okay. That's more just for the record than anything. I'll talk from it, and I don't want to ask you to read it tonight. But just a backdrop, council gave us authorization on an upper pressure plane preliminary engineering study and the wastewater treatment plant pretreatment facility November of last year and January of this year. So we got started on both those projects in January. Timing was great for us to look at both facilities because we're using your staff resources to get the information we need on both of those projects. And I just want to say I appreciate all the help that staff has been through this process. They're probably sick of me asking for stuff. Like, when is it going to end, Jason? When do you have enough? And I want to say that it's very important to get that information. We're talking about some facilities here that will, particularly for the wastewater treatment plant, that can cost in the realms of tens of millions of dollars. You know, that 1.5 MGD wastewater plant that you've got now that was built in 1997, that's a treasure for this city. That kind of facility today would cost you $15 a gallon, which would be, you know, 20 million bucks plus. So I want you to understand that. And what we're trying to do is preserve that facility and make it last another 20, 30 years. And that's our goal, and the information we're gathering is very, very critical for that. So I want to say that that's been very helpful for us. And just a cap on where we're at on both of these. I've already said it, but we're in the middle of data collection. Obviously, we've had some distractions in the last 2 or 3 months, so progress has not been what I want it to be on the upper pressure plane study. But I did put some estimated project completion will be this fall for that. I want to just say a couple of things we've seen so far. The existing Spring Street pump station capacity, a couple of years ago, we about doubled that pump station capacity by replacing the pumps and improving those facilities. But you are running at about 80 to 90% of its rated capacity to serve that upper pressure plane growth. Obviously, that's why we started this study. And one of the solutions is a new high service pump station at the existing 2 million gallon Georgetown ground storage tank. That's a Kempner water supply facility. And that will require some sort of an agreement from those folks to connect. What I hope to do is connect a pump station to that tank directly and be able to suck from the tank that's there and not have to build another ground storage tank. That will help your water quality out, and it will provide capacity for growth in your upper pressure plane, serve the business park, serve some areas in Sunrise Hills that have got too high of elevation for adequate pressures, and anyhow, set you up for growth. So that's our goal there. That's a project that had been looked at some number of years ago too by our predecessor, HDR Engineering. Another note that we've discovered in the process is your peak daily demand of last year. It was in September 11th, 2019. That was 3.4 MGD in that single day. That's about 96% of the rated capacity that you own in the Highway 195 pump station. That's a Kempner water supply facility. You have 6.9 MGD of water supply capacity in the treatment plants between Central Texas and Kempner, 6.9. You've got plenty there. But the bottleneck is a pump station out on Highway 195 that feeds what they call their Ivy Mountain tank. And you're pushing the limit there in that contract. That was a one-day event. I would have a feeling there was a lot of flushing going on that day because of water quality issues y'all were dealing with last summer. So I think some of that can be mitigated by other means, but something to be paying attention to. I think in general, you're probably at about 80% of that number. And then lastly, September 2019, there was a lot of flushing going on, and also in June of 2019. I mean, we're talking about upwards of 10 to 15% of the water that you're buying is being put on the ground. Really, there's some water quality issues at bay there that we're trying to get a handle on with this study, and I think we've got the right folks on staff to be able to help the city out with that. And we're also, as you know, we're working with Kempner Water Supply too over the last few months. And I think getting to know those two systems, I believe, will be able to help both sides out with some of that. I mean, that's enough water for 500 homes, you know, that we're just putting on the ground. And I'm going to move on real briefly to the wastewater treatment plant study, just some preliminary findings there and a recap of why we're doing this. There's two components to that wastewater treatment plant. It's the amount of water that goes through it and goes to the creek, and that's your hydraulic capacity, and that's 1.5 million gallons per day. You're actually only putting about 30% of that in the creek right now. So you're operating at 30% of that plant's hydraulic capacity. But the devil's in the details, right? And what we've looked at is the data that your staff's been collecting. And our estimate is that the organic loading of that plant is the other piece of the capacity that you don't really see until you start busting your permit limits of water quality going into the creek. You're still fine on that, but your organic loading is upwards of 70 or 80% of that facility right now. The rest of that story is 60% of the organic loading going to that wastewater treatment plant is from 10% of your flows. And that's from the Windsor Foods plant and your septic haulers. And we're starting to see some signatures that that plant is operating at or near capacity. For example, I think your staff had to start turning away septic haulers a couple, 3 months ago because they were not holding the right DO, dissolved oxygen levels in the aeration basins. The only reason I tell you that is because I want you to be aware of what we're doing is very important here, and getting a handle on this before you start busting permit limits is where you want to be. TCEQ rules require you to be at, once you hit 75% of your plant's capacity, to start planning for what you're going to do to solve the problem, and that's exactly what you're doing. Okay? So you've got some time, but we've also want to let you know that Ajinomoto Windsor pretreatment facility agreement allows for an average daily flow at that pretreatment plant of 100,000 gallons per day. What we're actually seeing is probably 75% higher than that number. So you're seeing something more like, 150, 200,000 gallons per day coming into that facility. We're going to come back to you guys with some better information, a more complete presentation, and some recommendations and some costs. But what we're getting at here is to try and capture that and treat that 10% of your flow. We can do that much more economically, much more efficiently, and let the main wastewater plant be as it is. Let that expensive facility last another 20 years. So, any questions, comments?
Anybody have anything for Jason? We appreciate you being here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes. We're going to wait on the rest of the updates to the next meeting. Item number 11, discussion regarding any item on the regular agenda. Does anyone want to discuss anything that's on the regular agenda this evening? Do you have a motion to adjourn workshop session?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. We'll take a 10-minute recess. And Chief Bailey, if you would lead us in invocation, please.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the calmness of today and the gentle breeze that you provided us. Lord, we ask that you watch over our meeting tonight and that you direct us and guide us at your will. Lord, please continue to wrap your arms around our community and protect our community from illnesses, viruses, and weather issues, Lord. Lord, we ask that you allow each and every one in this room to return home safely tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Under proclamations and presentations this evening, we do have a proclamation. I've got a proclamation in honor of L.E. Davis. whereas Lloyd Earl Dave Davis, a valued and longtime resident of this community, was born in Bastrop, Texas on May 28, 1920, grew up in Bartlett, Texas during the depths of the Depression, and as a boy he picked cotton and had a bicycle newspaper route to supplement the family's income. And whereas when World War II broke out, he was a student at the University of Texas and immediately volunteered for the U.S. Army Corps, now the United States Air Force. And whereas as soon as he was awarded his pilot's wings, he took leave and returned to Texas to marry Rebecca Abney Bitt Davis, a Lampasas native he had met at the University of Texas. And whereas in Greenville, South Carolina, he served as an instructor pilot and shortly thereafter was ordered overseas and was deployed for 18 months in the South Pacific, where he served as a B-25 bomber pilot and squadron commander for the 69th Bomb Squadron of the 13th Air Force, ultimately flying 77 combat missions against Japanese targets from numerous primitive jungle island bases in the South Pacific as part of General Douglas MacArthur's island hopping strategy. And whereas in 1944 he was ordered home and was stationed in San Antonio, and in 1946 was honorably discharged from the Air Force with the rank of major. And whereas he initially moved to Austin and completed his education, graduating with honors from University of Texas in 1949 with a Bachelor of Business Administration degree. And whereas shortly after, he and his wife then began their life in Lampasas, and he went to work for his father-in-law, Carlton Abney, at the People's National Bank of Lampasas, and eventually rose to the office of president and chairman of the board, acquiring majority interest in the bank in the 1960s and eventually retired in 1979. And whereas he was active in the Lampasas Chamber of Commerce and Lions Club, served as an officer of the Texas Bankers Association, served on the board of Lampasas County Water Control and Improvement District Number 1, and was a member of City Council from 1951 to 1963. And whereas his contributions to our community are of special note and have made a lasting impression on all of us, and on May 28, 2020, he will be celebrating his 100th birthday. It is with great pleasure that I, Misty Talbert, Mayor of the City of Lampasas, hereby proclaim May 28, 2020, in this great city as L.E. Davis Day. Moving on to public hearings and citizens' comments. Item 1.1, citizens.
I just want to say a
Please.
couple of words about L.E. Unfortunately, you know, what we're in right now, he should be standing right here. He is such a fantastic person. I've known him for a long, long time. And he adds credence to the old saying, if you have good genes and a good attitude, you're going to go a long way. And L.A. exemplifies that to the fullest. I've never seen him, been around him when he didn't have a wonderful attitude, positive and everything. So I just wanted to be a part of that, and I'm sorry he couldn't be here tonight. He is a fantastic guy. So thank you all for doing that to honor him.
Thank you, Jack. It's our honor, and we appreciate it. And if anybody ever has to speak about me in front of council, please let it be Jack. Item 1.1, citizens' comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter not included on the agenda may do so at this time. The city council may not deliberate on items presented under this agenda item. Again, the phone number to call in, 512-556-0332. Anyone wishing to comment on an item not included on the agenda? Finley, were we hoping to get a copy of this proclamation tonight for him? Did you want me to give that to staff?
Yes, please.
Or did we want to give that to Jack before he left? I'm sorry, I didn't know if that's what he was waiting on. Okay. Thanks, Beck. Item 1.2, citizens' comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter that is included on the agenda may do so at this time. None of those other? Item 2.0, minutes. 2.1, discussion of possible action concerning approval of minutes of the regular meeting on May 11th, 2020.
I didn't notice any errors. I would move to approve.
Second.
I do have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. 3.0 consent agenda. 3.1 discussion and possible action regarding the monthly investment report for April 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second from Mr. Williamson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. 4.0 boards and department reports. 4.1 library monthly report. Item 5.0, routine matters. 5.1, city manager's operational report.
Mayor and Council, just a couple of brief items. Just wanted to update you on a couple of staff changes. We want to welcome Chastity Shiflett to our staff. She took Vicky Towers' position. Vicky, of course, is now working with Chris and also doing some overlap work with Chastity and Christina as well. Also pleased to announce Brianna Joyce Spivey, daughter of Junior and Jessica. I also have, Chief, we have 2 announcements out of the FD. Well, one now, but one forthcoming. And that's Brady Wayne Gillis. And we've got a new Brady Wayne Gillis fireman in waiting coming. So we're always pleased to share the new additions and happy moments in our staff's lives with council. TPPA, we did participate on a call with them that we also had the opportunity to talk to Senators Buckingham and Campbell about the importance of municipal-owned utilities. The legislators shared their perspective of the impacts to state government and budget, as well as the optimism that they have. Both Senators Buckingham and Campbell are doctors, and so they had a unique perspective that and also wanted to communicate their support for public power in Texas. Golf course, I just thought we'd share this with you. Van reports that for the first portion of May, he actually doubled his revenue from May a year ago, and so some of the things that he's put into place in terms of tee times, as well as, folks being anxious to get out, but have helped with that, and we hope that trend continues. Cybersecurity, just to let you know, our state court systems as well as TxDOT has been impacted by attacks. We also wanted to just let you know that we have completed the initial round of training for our staff, and we will continue to provide updates and testing along the way to help protect our network. Chief Smith reports that the Texas Department of Emergency Management initially tasked local fire departments with the testing and collection of samples at nursing homes. Chief has coordinated with now the new lead agency in the state, as well as the county emergency manager, about 3 different options, and I think the most desirable was to have National Guard come in and actually conduct that testing, and then possibly after that, partnering with Acadian Ambulance and then perhaps with the city of Burnett. We're pleased that at least at this point, it looks like the National Guard testing will be an option that will happen. We still are waiting for the timing, et cetera, on that, but that will happen as a directive from the governor. And I don't know, Chief, is that everything? I also wanted to mention to you that I will be out of town Thursday and Friday of this week, and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Finley. Item 5.2, mayor's comments. I just wish everyone would wish Councilman Toops a belated birthday. That's all I've got. We don't have any unfinished business this evening. Item 7.0, new business. 7.1, discussion and possible action regarding non-exclusive lease of space on the Nix Water Tower.
Mayor and Council, staff has been working with the city attorney to prepare an agreement based on a request by an ISP to use space on the Nix Water Tower for a wireless service, not only within the city, but also would certainly provide services to the western part of the county as well. Just a couple of things that I will point out to you on the contract. Again, it has been reviewed by council on both parties. It is a 5-year contract with 3 5-year renewals as an option. It is non-exclusive, so that means if somebody else wanted to do the same thing for the same price, they could do that. The city, and I appreciate Councilman Clark asking these questions this afternoon regarding the structural integrity of whatever equipment is placed on the next tank and the city's oversight. And to that end, I just want to make sure council is aware of a couple of different parts of the draft contract. Section 3, which is the government approval, contingency, and compliance. It just states in a number of different ways that they have to be in compliance with state, federal, FCC, all of our local ordinances and zoning, as well as other approvals. And probably the meat of what Councilman Clark's question is answered in Section 5, which requires them to operate and maintain their equipment with good engineering practices, following all FCC rules and regulations. The other thing that's important is that we actually approve their plans. So they will prepare plans, submit them to the city, and we will approve them before they're allowed to continue. There's also a provision that they will not interfere with or otherwise disturb any other equipment that's currently on that tower, and that they have to maintain it in safe condition, good repair, in a manner suitable to the landlord that is not in conflict with the use of NICS tanks. So the primary purpose of the NICS tanks is obviously elevated water storage. So if it conflicts with our ability to run elevated storage at the NICS tank, then that would be not in compliance with this agreement. With that, we certainly feel like it is acceptable to move forward, and we'd seek council's motion to that extent.
I'll make a motion to approve and authorize the city manager to execute this agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second from council. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. 7.2, discussion and possible action regarding Kempner Water Supply Corporation wheeling agreement.
Mayor and Council, as you likely know, we received the draft agreement over the weekend. It was forwarded to Council after review by staff. Certainly, our counsel on this at Graves Doherty, Natasha, did talk with me when she sent it as well as today. A couple of things that I would point out to you. It is a net metering agreement. So in other words, whatever gallons we take through our meter and then whatever gallons we send out to Kempner out of the Georgetown tank, we just take the net of those gallons, and that's what's used to figure our charges and O&M. Kempner would be responsible for all pipe from the Georgetown tank to their pump station, to their metering item, to their customers. So in other words, where they connect to the Georgetown tank, they're 100% responsible from there on. We did include some language that if they intend to use over 25,000 gallons a day, that we would meet and confer. As we pointed out to you, Kempner does have 740,000 gallons of capacity in the Georgetown tank, but we just felt like in order for us to be able to serve the proper quality and quantity of water to our customers as well as theirs, we would just take a look at it once they met that milestone. And that we would have access to meter reading information or SCADA information for meter verification. As I've talked to Natasha, we don't feel like there are any major or substantive changes or clarifications that need to be made. And we would certainly feel comfortable, depending on the comfort level of council, if you were to make a motion to allow or authorize the negotiation and finalization of the agreement to staff, legal counsel, and the mayor. Any questions?
Finley, how many customers will they be serving with this?
Initially 22. There is an option as if they wanted to include some additional customers just to the east of Sunrise Hills, that would push that up to about 60 customers.
And that's okay, we can handle all that?
Yes.
I'd go ahead and make a motion to authorize the city manager to make the minor changes and execute the agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second from Councilman White. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's
And-
unanimous.
And just as a reminder, Mayor and Council, we will still have to take this agreement to Kempner.
Item 7.3, discussion of possible action regarding commercial parking in residential areas.
Mayor, Council, thank you for direction during workshop on the working draft. I'll make those changes and bring it back to you next council.
Thank you, Chief. Item 7.4, discuss and consider approval by certification, Exhibit B, for application for CARES Act Coronavirus Fund Grant.
Mayor and Council, we're seeking Council's approval to make application for the Coronavirus Relief Fund and seek a reimbursement for eligible expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Funds can be utilized for public safety and economic impacts of business closures. There's several different options on this. We've explored this a little bit as a group. We're not exactly sure how far this goes down, but we're pretty excited about this. There's an initial 25% deposit into one of Yvonne's bank accounts that we can operate out of. And then there's some guidance as far as what this needs to be spent on, but it's a pretty broad stroke as far as what we can do. Some of the things that have already been done by the city, by the LEDC, it seems like we can go ahead and look down those same roads again. So there's a big variety of funds in this and options in this. So we're just looking for y'all's approval for us to submit for this. And I think you have the document up there with you.
I'd make a motion to approve that application and have the mayor execute any related documents.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you, sir. 7.5, discussion of possible action regarding operations of city pools for the 2020 season.
Mayor and council, I'd just like to make the recommendation that you approve and allow us to implement the plan that Kim has put together and have a safe and successful swim season.
Do I have a motion from council?
I'll recommend approval based on, we were in agreement on the 50% capacity, and there was some discussion maybe on age 12, because that's the age that kids are entering middle school. So I make the motion for the 50% and then age 12.
A motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Questions? Conversation?
Lampasas County residents only, is that what we're doing?
County residents only?
Yes.
Can we state like at the beginning, what do you want to
See
do,
why we
Kim?
couldn't.
Yeah.
The only thing I say is, there was a mention of, friends from Louisiana here in town. I think that they need to go to another city pool. I really would like to stick for this time with Lampasas County residents only.
At this time?
At this time.
And with the ability to change as needed, if necessary?
Just come back to council if we have a change.
Okay.
So your motion was for county residents only?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second for 50% capacity, ages 12 and up, 12 and under with a parent only, for county residents only. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Good luck. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I have a second from Mr. White. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.